Discover 10 spine-chilling stories of haunted home alone nights, terrifying secrets exposed. The chilly autumn winds whispered secrets through the trees, wrapping themselves around Jane's small home like a sinister cloak. After a grueling day as a waitress and cleaner, the last thing she expected was anything unusual on this quiet night in suburban Denver. As she sunk into the worn couch with her spirited 6-year-old son, Lucas, she hoped for warmth. The popcorn sat ready, the cinnamon candles flickered their soft glow. Everything felt perfect until the first flicker began, a shadow dancing unnaturally against the wall, making the room feel like it was constricting. "Did you see that, Mom?" Lucas squeaked, wide-eyed, glancing fearfully at the window. Jane shook her head, ruffling his hair. "It's just the wind, sweetheart." But her voice trembled despite her efforts to soothe him. The darkness outside held eerie rustling sounds that gnawed at her mind. It made her paranoid, made her question if she really could shield Lucas from the horrors lurking just beyond their cozy refuge. The lights flickered yet again, and the familiar safety of their home felt alien. A bone-chilling draft swept through the room, sweeping past them, carrying an unsettling chill straight to her bones. Then, as if to assert that things were about to get much worse, the doorbell rang, a sharp jolt against the heavy atmosphere. Jane's heart raced, each thud echoing in her ears. Standing outside was Mr. Thompson, their neighbor. "Good evening, Jane," he said with a cheery smile. Why did he sound so eager? His stance was too close, his eyes sparkled a bit too bright. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing. She smiled back, nerves consuming her. "Hello, Mr. Thompson." A wave of unease washed over her as he lingered a moment too long. "Everything all right?" he asked, peering into the dimly lit house. She felt moisture prick at her palms as she politely declined his offers for help, practically willing him to leave. If only he would just turn and go. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mr. Thompson's smile faltered as the wind howled outside, creating an ominous chorus that matched her growing dread. The lights flickered again, leaving a deafening silence punctured only by maniacal shadows. She felt the panic rising inside her throat, tightening around her like a noose. What more would she have to endure tonight? With the flick of a switch, Jane's world changed. Desperate to shield Lucas from whatever was brewing outside, she pulled him close and whispered reassurances in his ear as she guided him toward the bedroom. Was the world beyond their door really that dangerous, or was her exhaustion gripping tighter than she thought? As they snuggled under the covers, the familiar warmth of their sanctuary turned frigid, a looming presence closing in on them. What had invaded their home? The door had become a barrier against the outside world, but what might come crashing through that threshold? Jane could feel each pulse of her heart in tune with the unsettling atmosphere. She needed to protect Lucas, but the shadows whispered of secrets too terrible to comprehend. What existed beneath the familiar homes and friendly faces of their neighborhood? As the lights flickered once more, threatening to betray them, one thought clawed its way to the forefront of her mind. Was terror truly waiting outside, or was the real monster hiding in plain sight? The bedroom felt like a tomb. Shadows clung to the corners, and the flickering glow of the candle cast eerie patterns on the walls. Jane sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Lucas tightly to her chest. His soft breaths were laced with fear, mirroring the thumping of her heart. "Mom, I don't like this," he whispered, burying his face into her side. She stroked his hair, fighting back her own rising panic. "It's just a storm outside, baby. Just a storm." But deep down, dread wrapped around her throat. The howls of wind outside felt alive, as if they sought to spill what lay hidden within the dark. A strange noise resonated from downstairs, a soft creaking as if the old house sighed under a weighted bore. Jane's breath caught, her muscles tensed. "Stay here, Lucas. I'll check the door." She pried herself away from his comforting warmth, her feet trembling as they met the cold floor. The shadows seemed to reach for her as she crept toward the doorway. In the hallway, the house creaked in protest. Memories of laughter and joy from moments before felt like a distant ghost. She inched closer to the staircase, glancing over her shoulder. Lucas's little face peeked from the bedroom, eyes wide and glistening. "Don't go," he called, fear etched in his voice. "I'll just be a second," she reassured him, forcing a brave smile. Yet with each step toward the staircase, the unease knotted tighter in her stomach. The air grew thick, pressing against her skin like a shroud. The doorbell had long stopped ringing, but it echoed in her mind, a reminder that something unresolved waited. As she reached the first step, another sound cut through the stillness, a soft thud coming from the front door. Jane halted, holding her breath. It wasn't just the wind. It was deliberate. The pounding of her heart matched the rhythm of the thump, growing louder in her ears. "Mom, please come back." Lucas's voice trembled, tinged with desperation. "Just wait," she whispered back, summoning courage she didn't feel. Steeling herself, she descended the staircase, the creaking wood beneath her feet grating on her nerves. Shadows slithered along the walls, shadows she could barely recognize as her own. With each heartbeat, she drew closer to the door. The front porch light flickered erratically, casting wild lights through the frosted glass. "Who's there?" she called, trying to suppress the quiver in her voice. Silence answered, but the thumping persisted, louder now, a steady rhythm that reverberated through her. Gingerly, Jane turned the knob, hesitated, then pulled the door open just a crack. A cold gust swept in, and she gasped, clutching the door for stability. The porch was empty. No one stood waiting on the other side. Just leaves swirling in the dark, oblivious to her fear. Suddenly, Lucas's frightened scream shattered the night. "Mom!" The urgency in his voice crashed over her like waves. Jane swung the door wide open, heart pounding, rushing back to the safety of her son. As she reached the bedroom, her eyes widened in horror. Lucas was gone. The bed lay empty, and the window stood ajar, curtains fluttering wildly as if something had escaped through them. "Lucas!" she screamed, panic flooding in. Outside, shadows danced beneath the moonlight. A figure loomed just beyond the trees, watching her, waiting. Her throat tightened. In her gut, she knew a nightmare was now free. What had she unleashed? She stepped back, heart racing, knowing this was just the beginning and that something was already inside her home. Jane's pulse pounded in her ears. The empty room surrounded her like a vacuum, swallowing her terrified cries. "Lucas!" She screamed again, but only silence responded. Despair clawed at her chest, squeezing tighter with every passing second. The window swayed ominously, as if taunting her, letting her know the path he could have taken. With trembling hands, she rushed to the window, peering into the dense darkness outside. Shadows elongated in the moonlight, creating grotesque shapes that melted and reformed like nightmares personified. "Lucas!" She choked out once more, nearly choking on fear and desperation. She turned back to the room, frantically searching, praying for a glimpse of her son's familiar form, still he deep down knew she wouldn't find him there. The night felt heavier than before, as if the world was conspiring against her. She thought about calling for help, but the phone line slipped her mind like a needle through fabric. What could she even say? "Help, my son is missing." It felt absurd, preposterous, weighty. Gritting her teeth, she forced herself out of the bedroom, stealing glances toward the hallway. Every creak of the old floorboard seemed louder, every rustle of the wind sent shivers racing down her spine. The house, a once warm refuge, now felt like a prison filled with unseen horrors, realities twisted in the rich chocolate shadows. As she neared the staircase, the air turned frigid, causing her breath to puff out in white clouds. "Lucas, please." The name echoed off the walls, relentless in its repetition. It felt futile, a chant in a terrifying ritual with no blessing in sight. Yet she pressed on, driven by a primal instinct that clawed for survival. The second she reached the bottom step, she froze. A whisper drifted through the air, as delicate as a spider's silk but unmistakably there. She turned her head sharply, straining to hear it again. "Mom," the soft voice floated from the darkened living room, faint and disembodied. Hope took a half-step forward within her, but the dread that suffocated her was more forceful. "Lucas? Is that you?" She called, but the only response was the silence swarming around her, thick and suffocating. Summoning courage, she stepped into the living room. The shadows shifted, spreading out like disease, and the smell of damp earth invaded her senses. Flickering light from a dying candle danced through the darkness, stripping bare the corners where the shadows masked unseen terrors. A figure, small and familiar, lounged near the window, the very place she had left ajar. "Lucas! Lucas, is that you?" Jane nearly stumbled over her own feet, rushing toward the silhouette, heart leaping into her throat. The dim light illuminated him partially, but something felt wrong. He didn't move, his little body was still, as if frozen in that moment. "Mom," the voice was low, too low, like it was emanating from somewhere deep within the earth. It wasn't an echo of her son. A chill seized her as she gripped the back of the chair, eyes widening as realization sank in. "Wait, that's not." Before she could finish, a hand shot out from the shadows, grabbing her wrist like a vice. Dread coursed through her veins as she felt an icy sensation wrap around her arm. "Mom, can't you see? I'm right here." Something dark slithered through the air behind the chair where an entity loomed, a faceless mass of swirling shadows. The shape didn't resemble Lucas anymore, it was too large, too separate from him. She stumbled back, yanking her arm free, voice raised in horror. "What do you want?" The figure leaned closer, and she could see, beneath the flickering light, eyes. Eyes that were not just watching, but feasting. "Lucas, where are you?" she begged, her voice breaking, but the room responded only with an unsettling chuckle, as if mocking her plight. Just when she thought the sound was all that would reverberate in the hollow of the night, from outside came a chilling giggle. Soft, sinister, undeniably wrong. Jane turned toward the window, her breath hitching in her throat, knowing this was no ordinary storm outside. What had she let in? What nightmare had he awakened? Outside, the shadows multiplied, eager to greet her. The air shifted, thick like molasses, as the giggle resounded again, lingering in her ears. She backed away from the window, her instinct screaming at her to escape. But where? There was nowhere to hide in this house anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in, trapping her in a waking nightmare. "Lucas!" Her voice cracked with desperation. She scanned the dark corners, praying for movement, for a sign of her son. The overwhelming darkness now felt alive, breathing, watching. Shadows writhed as if taunting her with their anonymity. She turned back to the faceless entity hovering near the chair. Its coalescence shifted, and what had once been indistinguishable now formed into vague unmistakable traits: the shadow of a grin, the mocking posture of a child's playful stance. An icy touch crawled up Jane's spine, a deep-seated fear clawing its way back out. It was not Lucas. Heart thrumming in her chest, she darted toward the hallway. Each step echoed loudly in the silence. She glanced back, desperate to keep an eye on the being that held her hostage in a twisted game. The flickering candlelight painted macabre shapes against the walls, and the laughter from outside grew louder, echoing her son's voice. "Mom, I'm so close." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to scream, to lash out at the darkness, but she felt frozen, her body weighed down by dread. What did it want from her? What kind of monster could mimic her child? In the hallway, she spotted the front door, a sliver of hope. If she could just reach it. Gathering every ounce of courage, she lunged forward, her feet quickening. But the moment she reached for the doorknob, the light flickered violently, plunging her into complete darkness. She gasped, the world around her twisting, the reality warping like a funhouse mirror. Frantic, she felt her way around, panic clawing at her throat. For a split second, she thought she heard Lucas' soft whispers again, urging her to stay, to listen, but she couldn't stay. Not here. Not under its watch. Leave me alone. She shouted into the black void, feeling absurd but desperate. Almost instantly, the whispers hushed, engulfed by the silence. Yet the shadows moved closer, converging around her. No, she fell backward, her body hitting the floor with a thud. Fear rippled through her, and she felt the floor beneath her tremble, as if sharing in her terror. The laughter from outside morphed into a chorus, rising and falling like a dark tide. Then, as if a dam had broken, a cacophony of voices rang out, calling her name, not just Lucas. Mom. Mommy. Help us! Confusion twisted in her gut. Who? Jane shouted, desperation clinging to her words. The shadows writhed and danced, each movement fueling the chaos in her mind. And then, she heard it, a soft, pleading voice, buried beneath the others. Mom, please! It wasn't just Lucas. Her heart sank. The shadows weren't alone, they were full of children, lost and trapped. With dread creeping back into her, Jane crawled to the wall that felt like the last barrier between her and whatever horror lurked beyond. A flicker of movement caught her eye from the corner of the living room, a figure among the multitude, creeping closer. Mom! It cooed, and her heart pounded a unified rhythm of hope and despair. Could it really be Lucas? She squared her shoulders, ready to fight for her son. But with each moment of anticipation, the darkness coiled tighter around her, ready to strike with an unrelenting hunger. Before she could react, a clawed hand shot out, grabbing her by the ankle, dragging her back into the depths of the dark. Do you want to join us, Mom? The chorus whispered, and something deep inside her braced for the inevitable. Trapped between fear and the desire to find her son, Jane realized she had to make a choice. In this descent into darkness, what would she sacrifice to save him? As the shadows tightened their grip, she steeled herself. Would she face the unknown or fall victim to the abyss? Outside, the storm raged on, a gale of chaos and shadows dancing in the moonlight, but a sinister calm settled over Jane as both terror and resolve collided within her. What was she truly willing to risk to bring Lucas back? The darkness tightened its grip, an unyielding vice around Jane's chest. Instinct screamed at her to fight, but she could barely breathe, let alone wrestle free. As she was pulled deeper into the abyss, the fingers clutched her tighter, cold and relentless, each caress sending shards of ice radiating through her veins. Help! Please, help me! Her voice cracked, desperate and raw. The shadows responded with a mocking giggle, echoing like shards of broken glass in the night. Suddenly, she felt warmth, an unexpected warmth, as if a long-lost memory flickered to life within her. It wasn't just a flicker of hope, it was a flame igniting deep inside. Lucas! She cried out again, her voice piercing through the veil of blackness, demanding recognition. The laughter faded momentarily, replaced by a raw, pulsing silence that enveloped her. In that silence, she felt something shift, an echo of power that resonated within her. She clawed at the ground, dirt and dust filling her nails, the sensation almost grounding. It was a tether back to the world above, and with that, she pulled the resolve from her very core. I will not lose you! She shouted, feeling her words reverberate against the walls of her prison. For a heartbeat, the darkness quivered, hesitating as if considering her defiance. The mass around her stuttered, fluttering like a damp leaf caught in the wind. She seized that moment, summoning every ounce of strength she could muster, she pulled against the chilling hands. Let go of me. The command echoed around her, as if the very air dared to respond. The claws loosened slightly, surprise replacing their cruel grip. There. Just as her heart filled with hope, she sensed a presence, its energy shifting and buzzing through the darkness. She could sense it, the essence of a child, frightened but eager. "Mom," it called again, softer, more tender than before. "Lucas." With renewed fervor, she strained forward, fighting against the unseen weight that sought to keep her bound. The laughter, which had once filled her with dread, now rang in her ears like a siren's call, a twisted harbinger of resolve that steered her toward her son. She summoned the shadows, her voice steady, commanding. "You may play your games, but I will not join you. My son is more than a toy, and I will not let you have him." The darkness recoiled as though stung, releasing her from its clutch. Desperation fluttered in her chest, guiding her as she rushed toward the sound of Lucas's voice, using the flickering echo as her beacon. The chaos of clashing voices faded, and before her, a pale light flickered, illuminating a small figure trapped within the tendrils of darkness. "Lucas!" she gasped, rushing closer. He stood there, his small face reflecting fear, but also relief. She reached for him, her heart swelling with maternal instinct. But just as her fingers brushed his cheek, the shadows surged, recoiling and dancing wildly. "No!" Jane screamed, falling to her knees. "Don't take him." The darkness laughed again, brushing past her, mocking her hopelessness. It shifted, reshaping itself into something terrifying, an amalgamation of every child it had consumed, desperate cries twisting into one voice. "He's ours now, join him." Jane trembled, paralyzed by the horrific vision, the tether to reality snapping like a frayed wire. She pressed her palms to the floor, grounding herself, locking onto the warmth of Lucas's small body just within reach. "Not today!" she shouted, channeling her love into the air that crackled with electric tension. "I will not give up." Suddenly, the grip of the shadows slackened, and she felt a surge of warmth as tangible as sunlight breaking through a storm. With every ounce of courage, she lunged toward Lucas, grabbing his hand. A blinding flash erupted as her heart roared in unison with the power of a mother's love, a rift opening in the darkness. As the world around her began to shatter, Jane seized the moment. But as she yanked Lucas close, a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the dark, staring right into her soul. "One will always stay." The rift spun them upward, a dazzling whirl of light and voices, but uncertainty lingered, a chilling sensation settling in the pit of her stomach. As the collapse of darkness surrounded them, one last scream broke free, a promise lingering in her ears. "Mom, if I go with you, who will take my place?" In the chaotic dance of light and shadow, a familiar giggle echoed through the corridors of her mind, haunting and disquieting. What was she willing to sacrifice to save him, and at what cost? Light enveloped Jane and Lucas like a warm embrace, but the echoes of despair clung to her like a shroud. They were no longer in the suffocating darkness, but the tension still coiled tightly in her chest. The moment she caught Lucas's hand felt electric, yet dread gnawed at the edges of her mind. "Mom?" Lucas's voice wobbled, uncertainty shadowing his face. "Hang on tight," she breathed, pulling him closer while searching the swirling light for a way out, a sense of direction. But instead of a sanctuary, voices pierced the air, familiar yet twisted. "You're both so brave," a sibilant whisper came from nowhere and everywhere at once, winding around them. "But bravery doesn't always save you, does it?" Jane felt panic rise in her throat. The light dimmed, and the warmth faded, replaced by a creeping chill that snaked into her bones. "Not again." She tugged on Lucas, trying to push forward, but the ground felt unstable, like standing on shifting sand. "We have to keep moving." Just then, the gentle glow faltered, flickering as the shadows began to pool around their feet. They felt heavier, darker. She looked back, dread chilling her blood. A silhouette lurked in the corner of her vision, lurking just beyond the edges of the light. Mom! I don't want to go back. Lucas whimpered, eyes wide. Not back. She gripped his hand tighter, her heart pounding with the urgency of their escape. We have to find a way out of here. But the laughter returned, a twisted harmony that echoed around them. Why would you leave, Jane? You're part of this now. You can't escape your future. The shadows surged and fell, morphing into a writhing mass of faces, tender smiles blending with grotesque grimaces, all staring hungrily at her and Lucas. They were trapped in a kaleidoscope of horror, shifting forms pulling them deeper into despair. No! Jane shouted, voice shattering the cacophony. I will not lose him. She focused, willing love into her words. Each syllable created ripples in the shadows, piercing the dark tendrils as they pressed against her skin. Lucas is my son, my heart. You cannot have him. The darkness hesitated, caught in her defiance. A crack of light beamed through the writhing mass, and she saw a glimmer of a path ahead, a chance. Let us go. Jane urged. They raced toward the light. It pulsed as they neared, illuminating their way, but cold fingers reached for them, grasping at their ankles. They stumbled into the glowing pathway, but shadows pulled at Lucas, their cold breaths shrouding him like icy tendrils. Mom! Lucas cried out. Help me! No! No! Jane screamed, feeling terror grip her heart. She lunged, body surging forward. She grabbed his arm just as the shadows threatened to pull him down. A ripping sensation jolted through her as she fought against the weight holding Lucas. With a desperate roar, she yanked him free, the darkness furling back, shrieking like a wounded animal. Reeling, they tumbled into the blinding light together, hearts pounding, but just as quickly the circle of radiance tightened, compressing around them like a noose. The whispers grew louder, cruel and taunting. One will always stay. Jane's breath became shallow. She glanced down at Lucas, but it was the finality in her own heart that terrified her most. If the path twisted again, who would be left behind? The light shimmered, and in that heartbeat, she realized the chilling truth. The deeper they sank into this strange realm, there would be no easy escape. What is it asking for? Lucas stammered. Jane's mind raced. What would she sacrifice to keep him safe? In that moment of gnawing doubt, she felt the shadows shifting, seeking their next chance to strike. Mom! Lucas began, but the words caught in his throat, arms trembling, fear etching deeper into his features as the glistening light flickered. Stay close! Jane cried out, desperation bubbling in her chest. But before she could say another word, the whispering shadows surged again, gripping her with a chilling hold. The darkness coiled tight around them, and as hope began to waver, a new voice erupted. If you take him, one of you will always know pain. Jane's heart froze. Was it a warning? A promise? She looked down at Lucas, his wide eyes reflecting her own terror. What price would they pay to escape this nightmare? And as the darkness pulsed and the laughter echoed around them, one unsettling truth became clear: something would have to be lost. Or was it already too late? The light flickered violently, testing Jane's grip on reality. The shadows around them rippled, almost as if they were alive, and the weight of their presence pressed down, suffocating. Each whisper intensified, weaving through her mind like sharp barbs. Jane, Lucas. The names danced mockingly in the air, tossed back at her like cruel confessions. She felt the darkness slithering around her ankles, tugging and pulling, as if it wanted to drag her back into the depths of its grasp. Mom! Lucas squeaked, terror etched into his young face. Hold on. She squeezed his hand harder, her knuckles white under the strain. Panic surged through her. Whatever it takes, we're getting out. Suddenly, the bright light awash in semi-translucent shades sharpened, and what was once a mere path now revealed twisted forms within it, figures caught in an eternal dance of despair. They reached with skeletal hands, their mouths agape in silent screams, eyes reflecting a despair so profound that Jane felt it clawing at her heart. "Please. Just let us go," she shouted, voice raw and desperate. But the laughter erupted, echoing off invisible walls. "Leave? Why would you want to leave? You're already part of the family. Jane hissed back, the word tasting like ash. But the shadows churned, revealing troubling glimpses of her own memories, laughter with friends, soft kisses, birthday celebrations. Each memory echoed around her like a haunting reminder, the shadows lacing through them with sinister intent. "Show us," Lucas begged, his small voice drowning in a sea of terror. "Mom, make them show us what they want." With trembling fingers, Jane pulled Lucas closer. The air quivered, and for a fleeting moment, she felt warmth seep through the cracks of coldness surrounding them. "We won't be afraid. We're stronger together." As if in response, the shadows shifted violently, merging into a single entity before them. The air crackled with electricity, and out of the darkness, a face emerged, familiar yet distorted, like a reflection in a shattered mirror. It was a version of herself, features twisted in agony, eyes brimming with darkness. What are you?" Jane forced out, voice quivering. The shadowy double smiled, but it wasn't the warmth of a loving visage, it was a rictus grin that screamed malice. "I am what you fear the most, Jane. I am each choice unmade, each sacrifice you try to ignore. I don't fear you," she shouted defiantly, despite the chill creeping up her spine. "Oh, but you do," it cooed. "You fear losing him." "No," Jane roared, clutching Lucas, "I fear losing myself to you." In a blinding flash, the luminescence began to pulse again, pulsing like desperate heartbeats. The shadows writhed, caught in a tug-of-war between two truths, love and fear collided. "Your pain if you could only give a little more," the voice sang. "No," Lucas cried, urging Jane back. "Mom, don't listen. It's lying." And with that, Jane felt something shift within her. The ache of fear began to transform, morphing into strength, clarity flickering to life. "If I must lose something," she whispered, shards of determination piercing through her fear, "then so be it. But you can't have him." The shadows recoiled, hissing like angry serpents. The clarity of her defiance blazed bright, igniting the air with a fierce glow. But the darkness retaliated, clawing at her resolve. "You cannot keep him safe. Are you willing to suffer?" A loud crack echoed around them, breaking the stagnant air like a thunderstorm. Jane narrowed her eyes, realizing the choice lay before her, shimmering in the light between them and the encroaching shadows. "Make your move," she cried, lifting her chin defiantly. But as the shadows surged forward, crashing like waves against her protective spark, Jane realized with horror that the true choice might not be a choice at all. And in that moment, the ground beneath them rumbled, the air thick with anticipation of what was to come. Would love triumph over despair, or would the shadows claim their price? The sound that followed was unlike anything Jane had ever heard. Like the cracking of ice on a frozen lake, the ground beneath them splintered. It was a warning, a harbinger of the chaos to come. The very fabric of their surroundings warped, as if each heartbeat could unravel the world, and Jane felt the potent blend of adrenaline and dread surge through her veins. "Mom!" Lucas cried out, her name spilling from his lips like a desperate prayer. "Stay close!" Jane yelled, fear wrapping around her words like a vice. The shadows howled, rising up from the cracks, twisting into shapes that were almost recognizable, yet devoid of humanity. The blackness thickened, pulling closer, it felt sentient, hungry. With each passing moment, the entity that paraded as her shadow self flashed distorted images in quick succession, her fears laid bare, conjured by some insidious magic. She saw herself alone, frantic, clawing at darkness that eagerly enveloped her. Lucas, more fragile and terrified than ever, was lost in it all. "No!" I won't let this happen. A fierce shout resonated from within her, igniting a flicker of hope. She took a step forward, her feet heavy but resolute. You think you can protect him? The twisted version of herself sneered, its voice dripping with venom. You cannot shield him from what you truly are. The darkness is always there. Always will be. No. Jane responded, seizing Lucas's hand tighter. I will fight for him. I would do anything. The shadows only laughed louder, filling the eerie void around them, as if daring her to take another step. Images of her past, the arguments, the nights spent wrestling with herself screamed through her mind. Each fragment held accusations, hints of where she'd faltered. The darkness reached out like claws, threatening to unravel the very truth she had fought so long to grasp. Yet, with each harsh whisper, a realization dawned: these shadows were fed by her own regrets and fears. She had the power to change it. Perhaps not alone, but together with Lucas. The thought sparked renewed vigor in her. Lucas! She shouted, shaking her son gently. We have to face it, together. Remember who we are. Mom, his voice trembled but held a hint of something stronger, something that mirrored the determination in her heart. Together. In unison, they stepped towards the twisted entity. The shadowy form wavered, its grin faltering as their combined light pulsed with every step. The air around them buzzed and hummed, a trembling melody of willpower against despair. Your sacrifice means nothing. You are already part of our world. The shadow screamed, its eyes dark pits filled with a swirling void. Not yet. Jane countered, her strength bolstered by the bond they shared. And then, they dove into the swirling maelstrom, teeth clenching against the chill of the void. She felt both weightless and painfully anchored, like a thread bound between dimensions. The world rippled, and for a moment she thought they had broken through. But the laughter returned, louder and more commanding. You cannot escape. The space around them warped violently, blinding light clashing with the profound darkness. Jane felt terror snake down her spine. The presence that loomed now wasn't just a fragmented piece of her, but a monstrous amalgamation of all her worst fears contorting, expanding, grasping. Lucas screamed. The shadows lashed out with renewed fury, snatching at his small body. Jane's heart raced as she lunged for him, the gaping mouth of darkness yawning before them. Lucas! She cried out, the plea unraveling into the cavernous void. And just as her fingers brushed his, the shadow enveloped them completely, spiraling them down into an unknown abyss. What awaited them on the other side? Was it salvation or the ultimate sacrifice? As the darkness swallowed her whole, Jane grasped for hope, clinging to the resolve that flickered like a distant star. What choice would she have to make next? And at what cost? The plunge into the void was like stepping into icy water. A suffocating darkness pressed around them, pulling them deeper, drowning every sound and sensation. Jane struggled to focus, to breathe, but terror coursed through her, a raw, unyielding current. The laughter from before still echoed, reverberating off the walls of her mind. Mom! Lucas's voice was a fragile whisper, almost lost in the swirling chaos. It lit a fire in her chest, the need to protect him igniting her will. She couldn't lose him. Hold on to me. She reached out blindly, her fingers trembling. When she felt Lucas's small hand slip into hers, a rush of warmth ignited inside her, pushing back the cold tendrils of despair. Suddenly, the darkness twisted around them, forming images, half-formed nightmares that flickered like flames against her resolve. She saw it all, the haunting faces of those she lost, the mistakes she couldn't rectify, the memories of a life wrapped in unresolved guilt. Stay away. Her voice cracked, but strength surged as she squeezed Lucas's hand tighter. He was her anchor. With every heartbeat, they pulsed in defiance of the shadow's oppressive wake. Together, Mom. Remember? Lucas's courage shone, a glimmer of light in the pitch-black tide. Yes. We can fight this. She felt an unexpected power swell within, an energy drawn from their bond, like a lighthouse guiding ships through unyielding storms. They focused on that light, pushing against the enveloping shadow that sought to envelop their very souls. But the darkness was cunning. It swirled and twisted, reshaping itself, taking the form of Jane's deepest fears. She could see herself, lost and alone, in an empty house. The echoes of her son's laughter fading into silence, the heart-wrenching realization crashing down like waves of sorrow. Let her go. She belongs to us. The shadow hissed, a multitude of voices intertwining into one threatening roar. And no. Jane gasped, the familiar weight of despair creeping back. I want to let you take her. The shadow hesitated, momentarily faltering, confusion lingering in its depths. But Jane pushed forward, willing to unleash every ounce of love, of hope she had left. Her spirit flashed brightly, overwhelming the darkness. Together, Lucas. With love. They surged ahead, uniting their defiance into a magnificent pulse of light that cut through the despair. The shadow shrieked, a sound that twisted anguish into the air, a desperation that burrowed into her bones. Suddenly, the void shattered, and they were thrust into a new realm of silence. It felt different here, like stepping into untouched snow. The air crackled, charged with an unsettling potential. Before them stood a vast expanse of everything they had ever known, but twisted. A playground lay before them, its swings swaying in an unseen breeze, casting eerie shadows that danced like memories on the ground. What is this place? Lucas asked, his voice a delicate thread wrapped in confusion. Jane scanned their surroundings, an ominous pit forming in her stomach. It looked familiar but warped, like a nightmare made real, where every twist of reality echoed with the pain of the past. Is this our home? Just then, a shadow shifted behind them, slipping through the veil of the new realm, a flicker of movement that wasn't quite right. The laughter rose again, chilling her to the core. No, it can't be, she turned, her heart pounding. The realization sliced through her thoughts like ice. But before she could react, an echo of her own laughter, a twisted mockery, sounded in the air, reverberating through the darkness. Welcome home, Jane. What horrors awaited them in this warped version of reality? What games would the darkness play now? The dread clawed at her throat, tight and unyielding. Was hope still within reach, or were they already caught in the snare of despair? The world around Jane twisted, the shadows swirling into grotesque shapes, consuming the remnants of the light she'd fought so hard to cherish. Fear gripped her heart as the echo of the dark laughter reverberated through the haunted playground, a sinister melody that mirrored her worst nightmares. Mom, I'm scared. Lucas clutched her hand, his little fingers trembling against hers, grounding her in this horror show of a reality. Jane knelt down, meeting his tear-brimmed gaze, searching for the right words to instill hope. We're together, she whispered fiercely, and as long as we are, we can find a way out. Yet as she surveyed the warped playground, swings creaking in an eerie breeze, slides leading into shadows instead of joy, doubt began to creep in. What do we do? She murmured, her voice barely carrying above the chilling whispers, as the house-like structures flitted at the edges of her vision, mocking her very essence. I don't know, Lucas replied, his voice faltering. But I want to go home. The shadows bellowed, enamored by their vulnerability, eager to exploit the cracks in Jane's resolve. Home? You don't belong in that place anymore, a sinister voice hissed, echoing around them. The laughter surged, thickening the air with malevolence. You made your choice, Jane. You can't play with us anymore. The distorted shadows flickered, their forms swirling into familiar faces, memories and regrets painted in quick succession. They were the people she had loved, each expression warped, their smiles twisted into grimaces of despair. Stop it! Jane screamed, the panic in her voice rising like a tide. You're not them. Oh, but we are, the voice responded, weaving through the air like smoke. You're one of us now. How long will it take before you accept that? Never. She roared. I refuse to be part of your game. The strength of her conviction repulsed the darkness, momentarily retreating like a tide pulling back before a storm. Are you sure? The voice taunted, the figures still looming in the corners of her mind. What about your pain? What about your secrets? An image flared in her mind, a memory of her lying on the kitchen floor, sobs racking her body after a long day. The feelings of inadequacy flooded her, of never being enough for Lucas, of chasing shadows in a world that demanded perfection. Stop! She shouted, shaking her head violently. You won't control me. I will fight for him. Suddenly, Lucas's small hands shot up. Look, Mom. He pointed, eyes wide with a mix of trepidation and awe. The air thickened, coalescing into a swirling vortex, revealing glimmers of an inner path, threads of golden light entwined with the darkness. Lucas, we need to go there. Jane exclaimed, heart racing as she recognized that the essence of their love shone bright against the inky shadows. It sparkled with every memory they had shared, laughs, hugs, the warmth of late-night stories. Together, they took a step toward the maze of light. As they approached, the shadows lashed out, desperate to snatch them away. You cannot leave. No more. Jane declared, pushing through the darkness. She gripped Lucas's hand tightly, feeling the swell of power. It coursed between them like a current, strengthening their resolve. We are stronger than this, stronger together. The shadows convulsed as they were drawn toward the radiance, each twisted face contorting in agony. Mom! Lucas urged, fingers clutching tighter. We're almost there. Just then, a segment of the shadows coalesced into a monstrous visage. Her twisted doppelganger descended upon them, its malevolent grin unfurling like a dark flower. You think love will conquer despair? You'll always be trapped in this soulless chamber. It screeched, a clawed hand slicing through the air toward them. No. She felt the power of their connection thrumming between them. You're nothing more than a shadow. You won't take him from me. As they leaped into the luminous path, the dark entity lunged forward, but the brightness intensified, casting the shadows into oblivion. With a blinding burst, they plunged into the light, the sealed chamber. Bursting open wide, sounds of joy enveloping them. Sunlight flooded their senses, warmth bathing their skin as they tumbled onto soft grass. Mom! We did it! Lucas squealed, a wide smile breaking through the panic of the night. Jane blinked, disbelief crashing over her in waves. They were no longer in the haunted playground. They lay sprawled under a resplendent blue sky, where sunlight poured down onto them like hopes fulfilled. Lucas, we're free. She could hardly speak, tears springing to her eyes as she pulled him into a tight embrace. We're home. The memories of the darkness lurked behind her eyes, but they felt small now, fearful whispers fading like shadows at dawn. They would live with those memories, but they would not be defined by them. Mom, I was so scared, Lucas murmured into her shoulder, his small body shaking with relief. I know, baby. But we did it together. And together, they would always be free. As Jane held him tight, she felt the weight of their bond shine brighter than any darkness could ever cast, filling her with an unwavering hope, a promise that they had conquered the night and emerged into the light. This was just the beginning of a stronger future, unmarred by past shadows. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more true fans like you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this gripping conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what keeps the magic alive.